This is a top view physical drawing, wiring diagram of the Radiola 20. And note where the audio tube is, the 120 tube, it's right in the middle. That's tube 5. Now here's a picture of the bottom of the Radiola 20. And we look up in the upper left-hand corner, the leftmost coils, that's the regenerative feedback coils. Then we move to the right. Those are the audio transformers. They're stacked one on top of the other. There's two of them there. Then the next coil over, that's the intermediate RF coils. And then all the way to the right, those are the antenna coils. Now if we move down to the front right, these are variable capacitors. And if we go to the front left, we can see the rheostats and the RCA jacks. This is the wiring diagram of the Radiola 20. And this first part that I'm lighting up with the primary color red, that is a regular TRF circuit. In other words, tuned radio frequency. We have two tank circuits there, and each one is amplified by a 199 tube. And that amplification is given to the detector circuit, and it's also a regenerative circuit. L7 is the movable coil, which we can see here, and of course the closer it moves to the larger coil, the more feedback we get. The last stages here in blue are the audio tubes. And tube 4, that's a 199, and you can see right there it has a jack associated with it. That's where you could plug in your headphones. And tube 5, that is the 120 audio tube to drive a speaker. And of course it has a jack for the speaker. Here's a back view of the Radiola 20, and you can see the tuning variable capacitors up front or at top. And you can see that there is a problem there because they're supposed to be somewhat moving together, and all three of them are moving separately. And you can see it here. The far left just doesn't move at all. The center kind of moves part way, and the only one that's working right is the one that is on the dial itself. Here's a closer look at the problem. The connecting mechanics between the shafts of the variable capacitors, both of them are broken. And note that the shafts also don't really line up. Also, I've got to figure out some way, of course, of connecting them together, but insulating them from each other. But since the shafts don't line up, we got to figure out some way of kind of making some kind of a flexible device like this. And I don't think that I'll run into any of these soon, so I'm going to have to come up with something new. I will be storing the pieces, but I don't think I'll ever find any. Might be able to make some someday. Well, this is what I came up with, and it seems to work pretty darn good. I started with some, I guess it's neoprene hose I got at a hardware store. I cut a short length that would fit on both shafts between the variable capacitors, and I cut it lengthwise so I could get them on there easy, because that way I didn't have to take a lot of capacitors apart. And then I used hose clamps to hold it together. Now, of course, the hose clamps are very tight, and just that alone was almost enough to make things work. But the two washers and the screws together at the end of the overlap of the hose clamp supplied enough stability, but still enough flexibility to make this whole thing work. Here you can see how this works. And what I like about this is everything works the way it should, of course, but everything is adjustable, which is very important for tuning up this radio and make it perform the best that it can. Now I have completed my adjustments on the variable capacitors, and now I'm going to test it before I put it back into the cabinet.
College football recruiting. It's my Star Trek convention. It's my Dungeons and Dragons. None of you with a social life care about this. You go on dates, you go out to dinner, you spend time with your family. Every year at this time, I hole myself up in a small room and go to recruiting websites, and I care deeply about it. My message board name is Recruiting Later and...
Now I have put the radio back together and doing another test, and I have the radio tuned to WPTF, and notice on the dial that the dial points to WPTF where the original owner wrote it on the dial.
This annual emerging issues forum begins today in rural. Your bank account. WPTF went really spring. The North Carolina Education Lottery announced that the winning ticket for Saturday night's Powerball drawing was sold in Asheville. The ticket was worth a $40 million annuity or $69.2 million in change. When the premium super lottery, the winner elects to take the lump sum. It's the third time that North Carolina has had a winner in the Powerball drawing since the state established the lottery on May 30th, 2006. Mike Riley News, Radio 680 WPTF. Now the tanks did come marching.